The War Council chamber fell silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence. No, this was the awkward, suffocating variety that made even seasoned military commanders shift uncomfortably in their exoskeleton supports. High Executor Vrax 9 let out what could only be described as a defeated wheeze through his respiratory slits. 300 cycles of military experience, and somehow, impossibly, they were losing to a species that cried at fictional holographic projections. Let me understand this correctly, Vrax began, his tertiary eyes narrowing at the intelligence officer before him. Outpost Gamma 7. 1,200 soldiers. State-of-the-art plasma defenses. Molecular shield barriers. And you're telling me that 37 humans waltzed in and took the entire facility in under 4 hours? Lieutenant Kess 4 gulped. Literally gulped. The sound echoed through her thorax like rocks tumbling down a canyon. Yes, High Executor. 37. Yes, sir. Humans. Correct, sir. Vrax wanted to slam his primary appendage onto the strategy table but stopped himself. That would be emotional. And if there was one thing the collective prided itself on, it was their absolute, unwavering commitment to pure logic and rationality. Emotions were weakness. Emotions were chaos. Emotions were, apparently, the reason they were getting their chitinous behinds handed to them on a silver serving platform. Show me the battle footage, Vrax commanded, settling into his seat with all the enthusiasm of someone about to watch their career implode in real time. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the exterior of Outpost Gamma 7. A pleasant little rock floating in the Theta Quadrant, valuable for its uranium deposits and strategic positioning, was valuable anyway, before the humans decided they wanted it. The footage showed the human assault team approaching. Vrax counted them. Once. Twice. 3 times, because his brain refused to accept what his optical sensors were telling him. 37 humans in mismatched armor, carrying weapons that looked like they'd been assembled in someone's garage, riding in transport vessels, held together with what appeared to be actual adhesive tape and sheer determination. They can't be serious, Vrax muttered. Oh, but they were. The humans hit the ground running. No formation, no synchronized tactical approach, no logical battle plan whatsoever. They just went. Like someone had pointed at the base and said, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if we owned that?" And everyone else replied, "You son of a gun, I'm in." One human, a female with bright red hair, tied back in some kind of primitive binding, actually laughed as plasma fire erupted around her. Laughed. As if getting shot at was the most entertaining thing to happen to her all week. "Zoom in on that one," Vrax ordered, pointing at the redhead. The display magnified, showing her face clearly now. Her identification tag read, Captain Riley Vasquez, age 29. Originally from somewhere called Texas, which apparently explained everything to other humans, but meant absolutely nothing to the collective. Captain Vasquez ducked behind a container, checked her ammunition, and then grinned at the soldier beside her. "Marcus, you owe me 50 credits. Told you they'd have the plasma cannon set to automated." The one called Marcus, a dark-skinned human with a scar across his jaw, actually rolled his eyes while being shot at. "Riley, we're literally in a war zone right now. So, a bet's a bet. I hate you so much." "No, you don't." And then they both popped out from cover and returned fire with enough enthusiasm to power a small star destroyer. Vrax felt something crack. It might have been his mandible. It might have been his faith in an ordered universe. "They're bantering," Kess 4 offered helpfully. "Our xenopsychology department believes humans use humor as a coping mechanism for stress." "I don't need a lecture on human psychology, Lieutenant. I need to understand why our soldiers are cowering behind fortifications while these. Vrax struggled to find an appropriate term that wouldn't violate about 17 different collective protocols on professional language. These emotional disasters are treating a military operation like some kind of recreational activity. The footage continued. A human male, massive by their species standards, simply picked up a plasma repeater that normally required a tripod mount and carried it like a handheld weapon. His nameplate identified him as Sergeant Dmitry Volkov. He charged a defensive position while screaming something incomprehensible at the top of his respiratory system. "What is he saying?" Vrax demanded. The translation subroutine kicked in. "For my grandmother's cooking, you will know true fear." His grandmother's cooking? Human warriors often invoke familial connections during combat, HFY explained, consulting her datapad. It appears to increase their aggression by approximately 40%. We don't understand why. Vrax didn't understand why either. Nothing about humans made sense. They were walking contradictions wrapped in flesh and held together by stubbornness and caffeine. The battle footage showed the humans breaching the outer defenses. No strategy, no tactical superiority, just raw, unbridled determination, fueled by what appeared to be spite and an alarming amount of adrenaline. One human took 3 plasma shots to his body armor, staggered, looked down at the scorched marks, and then looked directly at the camera with an expression of absolute indignation. "They scratched my armor!" he shouted to no one in particular. "My wife gave me this armor. Do you know how hard it is to find good armor that fits when you're 6'4"? Do you?" Then he proceeded to demolish an entire automated defense turret with his bare hands. His bare hands. Vrax's tertiary heart palpitated. "High Executor, should I continue the playback?" HFY asked nervously. "Please don't," Vrax wheezed. But he knew he had to watch, had to understand, had to figure out what the sacred circuits they were doing wrong. The humans pushed deeper into the outpost. Collective soldiers outnumbered them 30-1, held superior positions, had better weapons, better armor, better training. And they were losing. Not because the humans were better soldiers, not because they had superior technology or tactics. They were losing because the humans absolutely refused to acknowledge that they should be losing. Captain Vasquez led a team through a corridor that should have been a kill zone. Crossfire from 3 different angles, nowhere to hide, no chance of survival. She saw the situation, assessed it for precisely half a second, and then did something that made Vrax's logical processors nearly short-circuit. She smiled. Not a smile of happiness, not a smile of confidence. A smile that said, "Watch this." Then she turned to her team and said 5 words that would haunt Vrax's nightmares for cycles to come. "Remember the Alamo, boys. Let's dance." What followed could only be described as controlled chaos or uncontrolled chaos, or perhaps just chaos in general with a side order of more chaos. The humans charged, not tactically, not carefully, they just went. Smoke grenades deployed. Someone started playing music over their communications channel. Actual music, with guitars and drums and some human screaming about not going quietly into some night or another. The collective soldiers, trained for logical warfare, prepared for tactical engagement, simply froze, because nothing in their training, nothing in their combat simulations, nothing in their entire military doctrine prepared them for enemies who fought like they were simultaneously having the worst and best day of their lives. One collective soldier actually dropped his weapon and ran. Not because he was hit, not because he was surrounded, because a human female, barely reaching his mid-torso in height, looked at him and said, "Honey, I've dealt with rush hour traffic in New York City. You think you scare me?" The psychological warfare was devastating. Lieutenant Kes4 paused the footage. High Executor, this is where it gets unusual. More unusual than what I've already witnessed? Significantly. The playback resumed. The humans had reached the central command center, the last defensive position, where the collective's best soldiers, the elite guard, waited with the full expectation of repelling any assault. Captain Vasquez kicked in the door, not breached it with explosives, not hacked the entry system, kicked it with her foot, and it worked. The elite guard opened fire immediately. Standard protocol, overwhelming force, mathematical precision. The humans scattered like water, hitting hot metal, each one moving in seemingly random directions with no coordination whatsoever. And yet, somehow, impossibly, they covered each other perfectly. Not through planning, not through training, through instinct, through something the collective couldn't quantify or predict, through emotion. Vrax watched as one human, a medic identified as Corporal Jamie Kim, ran directly into enemy fire to drag a wounded teammate to safety. No hesitation, no calculation of survival odds, just action. "Hang on, Martinez!" Kim shouted, hauling the injured soldier behind cover. "You're not dying today. You still owe me 20 credits from poker night." "Jamie," Martinez coughed, "I think I'm bleeding pretty bad here." "Oh, shut up. I've seen you whine about paper cuts worse than this. You're fine. You're fine. Stay with me, buddy. Come on. Think about your daughter's graduation next month. You promised her you'd be there." And somehow, impossibly, Martinez held on. Not because of superior medical technology. Not because his injuries weren't severe, because another human told him to. And apparently, that was enough. The elite guard, witnesses to this blatant illogic, began to falter. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to accept defeat? That draws strength not from logic but from connections to others of their kind? That turns weakness into advantage simply by caring too much to give up? Captain Vasquez stood in the center of the command room, surrounded by collective soldiers, and started laughing. Not nervous laughter, not hysterical laughter, genuine amusement. "You know what's funny?" she said conversationally, as if they weren't all pointing weapons at each other. "You guys keep telling everyone that humans are too emotional, that we're unstable, dangerous, unpredictable." She reloaded her weapon with casual precision. "You're absolutely right." Then she looked directly at the ranking elite guard commander and smiled that smile again. "But you forgot something important. You forgot that emotions? They're not a weakness." The elite guard commander raised his weapon. "They're why you should fear us." The remaining humans burst through 3 different entry points simultaneously. Perfect timing. No communication. They just knew. Vrax sat in silence for a long moment, processing what he'd witnessed. Finally, he spoke. "Get me Command Admiral Thresh Prime. We need to discuss terms of negotiation with the human alliance." Kes4's mandibles dropped. "We're surrendering?" "We're not surrendering, Lieutenant. We're recognizing reality." Vrax pulled up the casualty reports from the past 6 months of human conflict. The numbers were damning. Every battle we fight against them, we lose. Not because they're better warriors, but because they fundamentally don't care about the odds. He highlighted a particular section of the report. "Do you know what a human soldier said when asked why they keep fighting even when defeat seems inevitable?" Kes4 shook her head. "They said, because someone has to. And it might as well be me." Vrax closed the reports. "That's not logic, Lieutenant. That's not rational calculation. That's not any kind of military doctrine we understand." "Then what is it, sir?" "It's humanity." Vrax stood, his exoskeleton creaking with age and exhaustion. And I'm beginning to think we made a terrible mistake assuming emotions made them weak. Hi, Executor, there's something else you should see. What now? SCIFI pulled up another file. Communications intercepts from human vessels. We've been monitoring their broadcasts. After the battle at Gamma 7, Captain Vasquez sent a message to the human fleet. Play it. Riley Vasquez appeared on the display, still in her scorched armor, dirt smeared across her face, looking absolutely exhausted, and somehow still grinning like she'd just won some kind of prize. Hey, Command. This is Vasquez. We took the outpost, lost some good people. Martinez is going to make it, thanks to Kim. Dmitri destroyed another weapon he wasn't authorized to destroy. Pretty sure maintenance is going to kill him before the enemy does. She paused, and her expression shifted, became serious. But yeah, we won. Again. And I know the collective is probably watching these transmissions, so she looked directly at the camera. Here's the thing you need to understand. You keep saying we're too emotional, that we let feelings cloud our judgment, that we're irrational and dangerous. Her smile returned, but it wasn't friendly. You're damn right we are. But here's what you missed in all your logical calculations. Our emotions? They're not bugs in the system. They're features. We fight harder because we care about the person next to us. We take risks because we believe in something beyond ourselves. We refuse to quit because giving up would mean letting down everyone who ever believed in us. She leaned closer to the camera. So, yeah, we're emotional. We're irrational. We're unpredictable. And that's exactly why you're never going to beat us. The transmission ended. Vrax stared at the blank display for a long moment. Lieutenant SCIFI, I want you to compile a complete strategic assessment of human psychological warfare capabilities. I want every cultural anthropology expert we have analyzing their behavioral patterns. And I want recommendations on my desk within 3 cycles on how we can possibly counter an enemy that turns our strengths into their advantages. Yes, sir. But, High Executor, do you think that's possible? Vrax thought about Captain Riley Vasquez, standing in a combat zone, laughing at danger while protecting her squad. About Corporal Jamie Kim, running into fire to save a friend. About Sergeant Dmitri Volkov, fighting for his grandmother's cooking. About humanity. Honestly, Lieutenant, I have no idea, but we better figure it out fast. Because if there's one thing I've learned from watching these humans operate. He pulled up the map, showing human territorial expansion over the past year. The growth was exponential. It's that they're not going to stop until they've either made friends with everyone in the galaxy or convinced everyone that friendship is the better option. That doesn't sound so bad. Sir, you haven't seen their friendship requirements, Lieutenant. Apparently, it involves something called karaoke night and drinks they call tequila shots. I reviewed the xenobiology reports. That substance should be classified as a chemical weapon. SCIFI made a notation on her datapad. I'll add that to the cultural assessment, sir. Vrax settled back into his seat, feeling every one of his 300 cycles. Somewhere in the Theta Quadrant, 37 humans were probably celebrating their victory, drinking their poisonous beverages, singing their chaotic songs, and being absolutely, insufferably human. And there wasn't a damn thing the collective's logic could do about it. Dismissed, Lieutenant. And Kess? Yes, sir? Yes, sir? Start learning about human diplomatic customs. Something tells me we're going to need them. As the lieutenant left, Vrax pulled up one final file. A psychological profile of humanity, compiled by the collective's best analysts. The conclusion was simple, direct, and absolutely terrifying. Humans compensate for physical limitations through social bonding, emotional resilience, and spite. Recommend avoiding prolonged conflict. They appear to become more dangerous the longer they are opposed. Suggest diplomatic resolution before they decide we're worth befriending. Their friendship may be more devastating than their enmity. Vrax closed the file and allowed himself something he'd never done before. He laughed. Because really, what else could you do when faced with a species that turned feelings into weapons and made warfare look like some kind of demented family reunion? Somewhere in the facility, an alert chimed. More human ships entering their space. More diplomatic requests for meetings. More invitations to what humans called peace talks. But what was almost certainly going to involve more of that tequila substance and possibly something called barbecue that the xenobiology team was still trying to classify. Vrax stood, straightened his uniform, and prepared to face whatever humanity had in store for the collective next. After all, if you can't beat them, you might as well learn to tolerate them. And maybe, just maybe, try some of that grandmother's cooking everyone kept going on about. Though probably not the tequila. Definitely not the tequila. Admiral Thresh Prime was having what humans would call a very bad day. Actually, strike that. Thresh was having a very bad month, possibly a very bad year. The temporal measurement didn't really matter when your entire military doctrine was crumbling faster than a supernova in reverse. She stood before the collective Supreme Council, all 17 members staring at her with varying degrees of what she could only interpret as disapproval mixed with confusion. The holographic display behind her showed the updated star charts. Human territory had doubled. Again, in 3 weeks. Explain, Counselor Ventu demanded, his vocal synthesizer stripped of any inflection that might betray emotion. Pure logic, pure reason, pure denial of the catastrophe unfolding before them. Thresh resisted the urge to gesticulate wildly. That would be emotional. Instead, she pulled up the latest intelligence reports with mechanical precision, even though internally she was screaming into the void. The humans have established 7 new colonies in former neutral zones. They've negotiated trade agreements with the Kresh Dominion, the Solarian Confederacy, and somehow convinced the Hive Collective to share agricultural technology. The Hive Collective, counselors, the species that hasn't spoken to anyone in 400 cycles. How? Counselor Prax 11 asked. Thresh pulled up the communication logs. They sent an ambassador named Tess Okafor. According to intercepted transmissions, she brought something called cookies and asked about the Hive Queen's children. The council chamber fell silent. The Hive Queen doesn't have children, Ventu stated. She has larvae production units. Yes, well? Ambassador Okafor apparently spent 6 hours looking at pictures of larvae and saying things like, "Oh my goodness, they're adorable, and you must be so proud." The Hive Queen signed a 50-year alliance treaty the next day. Counselor Zara 6, the Council's chief military strategist, leaned forward. "Admiral, I've reviewed your combat reports. The recommendation to pursue diplomatic channels. I need you to clarify something for the record." "Yes, Counselor? Are you suggesting the collective surrender to a species we outnumber 17-1, outgunned by a factor of 30, and possess technological superiority over in every measurable category?" Thresh met Zara's gaze directly. "I'm suggesting we stop fighting them before they decide to get creative." "Creative? Counselor, may I speak freely?" "You may." Thresh took what humans called a deep breath. Even though her respiratory system worked nothing like theirs. "We're not losing because they're stronger. We're losing because they fight like the universe personally offended them, and they're determined to prove it wrong. Every defeat makes them more determined. Every casualty makes them fight harder. Every time we think we've established their limitations, they do something completely unprecedented and illogical that somehow works. She pulled up tactical footage from the Battle of Xerxes Station. 3 days ago, we engaged a human frigate. One frigate. Our battle group consisted of 14 warships. The logical outcome was obvious. The footage showed the human vessel, smaller than a standard collective destroyer, facing down an entire fleet. Its hull was patchwork repairs. Its weapons were outdated. Its shields were operating at 60% capacity. It should have been target practice. The ship was commanded by Captain Tobias Adler, age 47, former merchant marine. No formal military training beyond what humans call on-the-job learning. His crew numbered 83. The council watched as the human frigate charged directly at the collective battle group, not flanked, not maneuvered tactically, just pointed itself at the biggest ship and accelerated to full speed while broadcasting something on all frequencies. The translation subroutine rendered it. "If you want my cargo, you can pry it from my cold, dead hands. And fair warning, I'm really attached to these hands." "He's joking?" Prax 11 asked uncertainly. "I believe so, counselor. Our psychological assessment team indicates humans frequently use humor when facing mortality. They find it comforting somehow." The footage continued. The collective fleet opened fire with mathematical precision, calculating trajectories and power distribution for maximum efficiency. Captain Adler's response was to perform a maneuver that violated 3 laws of physics and probably several traffic regulations. His ship spiraled, rolled, and somehow slipped through a gap in the weapons fire that shouldn't have existed, firing its own weapons, seemingly at random, but hitting critical systems with impossible accuracy. "Luck?" Ventu suggested. "That's what we thought, until we analyzed his other 17 engagements. He does this consistently, counselors, not because of superior training or advanced targeting computers." Thresh highlighted the relevant data. "He does it because, and I quote from his intercepted communications, I've got a feel for it. He navigates combat through intuition. Through something our tactical computers can't predict because it doesn't follow any logical pattern." The battle footage showed the human frigate dancing through the collective fleet like it was performing some kind of elaborate artistic routine rather than fighting for survival. It took hits. Shields failed. An engineer identified as Paolo Reeves actually climbed outside the ship during combat to manually repair a damaged thruster while wearing nothing but a pressure suit and what humans called pure spite. When asked later why he did it, Reeves replied, "Because somebody had to, and I was closest to the airlock." The collective fleet, faced with an enemy that refused to follow any predictable behavioral model, began making mistakes. Small ones at first: overlapping fields of fire, targeting redundancies, communications delays. The humans exploited every single one, not through superior analysis, not through advanced algorithms, through something Thresh's tactical officers called aggressive improvisation, and what she privately thought of as organized insanity. Captain Adler rammed one of the collective destroyers, not accidentally, deliberately, while broadcasting, "This is for making me miss my daughter's birthday party." The destroyer's shields absorbed the impact, but the psychological effect on the collective crews was devastating. Who rams a military vessel because they missed a social gathering? Humans, apparently. The battle ended with the collective fleet withdrawing, not because they were defeated militarily, but because the cost of continuing to fight an enemy who treated warfare like a personal insult was becoming untenable. Captain Adler's final transmission was simple. "Thanks for the workout. Same time next week?" He was joking. Probably. The analysis team still couldn't determine for certain. Thresh paused the footage. "This is what we're facing, counselors. Not a superior military force, but a species that fundamentally approaches conflict from a direction our entire strategic framework wasn't designed to handle. Zara 6 studied the data. What do our xenopsychology experts recommend? They recommend we stop thinking of emotions as weaknesses and start understanding them as tactical advantages we've never developed. Elaborate. Thresh pulled up comparative analysis charts. When our soldiers face overwhelming odds, they calculate survival probability and retreat when chances fall below acceptable parameters. Logical, efficient, predictable. She switched to human combat data. When human soldiers face overwhelming odds, their performance actually improves. Stress hormones increase physical capabilities. Social bonds trigger protective behaviors that override self-preservation. They call it fighting for something bigger than yourself. Irrational. Ventu stated. Effective, Thresh countered. Counselor, I've analyzed 400 separate engagements between collective and human forces. We win the battles where pure technology and numbers determine the outcome. We lose every engagement where adaptation, morale, and unpredictable decision-making matter. She pulled up casualty statistics. More concerning, our soldiers are developing what humans would call low morale. They're requesting transfers away from human engagement zones. Some are resigning commissions entirely. Our military psychologists report increasing cases of what they're terming combat anxiety. Fear, Counselor Prax 11 said quietly. Yes, Counselor. Fear. Our soldiers are afraid of humans. Not because humans are physically superior, but because fighting them is psychologically exhausting. You never know what they'll do next. Every encounter is unpredictable. Every battle feels like fighting against chaos itself. Ventu's optical sensors dimmed, a sign of deep processing. Are you saying the collective's military forces are experiencing emotional responses to combat? I'm saying humans are contagious, Counselor. Exposure to their methods, their unpredictability, their sheer determination despite logical odds, it's affecting our personnel. They're starting to question the doctrine that emotions are weaknesses. Thresh pulled up one final report. Personnel, psychological evaluations. Last week, a collective soldier named Drex 15 saved a wounded comrade under heavy fire. When asked why he risked himself for someone who was statistically unlikely to survive, he said something that terrified our psychological assessment team. What did he say? He said, because it felt like the right thing to do. The council chamber erupted in what could only be described as organized panic. 17 logical minds simultaneously confronting the possibility that their entire philosophical framework might be flawed. Counselor, Zara 6 called for order. Admiral Thresh Prime, you've presented compelling evidence that continued military engagement with humanity is strategically inadvisable. What do you propose? Immediate diplomatic negotiations, full peace treaty. And I recommend we hire human consultants to help us understand their perspective. Hire them? Counselors? If we can't beat them, and we're clearly starting to become them, we might as well learn from them directly. Besides, according to Ambassador Tess Okafor, humans love helping others solve their problems. They call it being neighborly. Ventu made a sound like grinding metal. You want us to ask humans for help understanding ourselves? I want us to survive the next year with our territory intact and our military forces not completely demoralized, Counselor. If that requires admitting humans understand warfare better than we do, then yes. The council deliberated. Thresh could see the calculation processes running behind their optical sensors, weighing options, analyzing probabilities, doing exactly what humans didn't do, and exactly why they were losing. Finally, Zara 6 spoke. Very well. Admiral, you're authorized to begin preliminary diplomatic contact, but we need assurances that humans will honor any agreements. With respect, Counselor, That's the one thing I'm not worried about. Humans take promises seriously. Something about honor and integrity. They have entire cultural frameworks built around keeping your word. And if negotiations fail? Thresh pulled up the latest intelligence reports on human military expansion, new shipyards, new training facilities, new technologies being developed at rates that suggested humans viewed scientific advancement as a competitive sport. If negotiations fail, counselors, I estimate we have approximately 6 months before human territory surrounds our core systems, their economic alliances control all major trade routes, and their cultural influence has spread to every species in the sector except us. Conquest through friendship, Prax 11 observed. The most terrifying kind, Thresh agreed. You can't fight it with weapons, can't logic your way out of it, and refusing to participate just makes you look unreasonable. She thought about Captain Riley Vasquez standing in that command center, smiling while surrounded by enemies, about Captain Tobias Adler ramming a warship over a missed birthday party, about Ambassador Tess Okafor conquering the Hive Collective with baked goods and genuine interest, about humanity. Counselors, I've spent the last 6 months studying humans, reading their literature, analyzing their history, trying to understand what makes them so effective despite being so illogical. And what did you learn? Thresh looked at each council member in turn. I learned that they're not illogical. They're differently logical. Their reasoning includes variables we've spent millennia trying to eliminate. Compassion, loyalty, hope, spite, humor, love, rage. And those variables don't make them weaker. She pulled up one final image, a photograph from human historical archives. Soldiers in primitive uniforms, faces covered in dirt and exhaustion, arms around each other, smiling despite obvious hardship. They make humans unpredictable, adaptable, resilient. You can destroy their equipment, damage their ships, even defeat them in battle, and they'll come back stronger, because the one thing you can't destroy is their determination to keep trying. The photograph remained on display as Thresh delivered her final assessment. That's why I recommend peace, counselors. Not because we can't keep fighting, but because fighting humans means fighting against something that gets stronger every time you knock it down. And I, for one, would rather have them as allies than enemies. They really are terrifying, Ventu observed. Absolutely, Thresh agreed. But I think that's kind of the point. They own it. They know they're emotional, irrational, stubborn creatures who refuse to give up even when they should. And instead of seeing it as a weakness, they turned it into their greatest strength. She smiled. Actually smiled. An expression she'd picked up from watching too much human footage. That's why you should fear us, counselors. Not humanity. Us. Because we're already changing. Already learning from them. Already starting to understand that maybe, just maybe, pure logic isn't the only path to success. The council sat in contemplative silence. Finally, Counselor Zara 6 spoke. Admiral Thresh Prime, you're authorized to contact human diplomatic channels and arrange preliminary peace negotiations. And Admiral? Yes, Counselor? Try the cookies, if they offer them. Preliminary reports suggest they're quite effective at establishing rapport. As Thresh left the council chamber, she felt something unusual, something she couldn't quite quantify or explain through logical analysis. Hope. She was feeling hopeful. How very human of her. 3 days later, Thresh found herself aboard a human diplomatic vessel, sitting across a table from Ambassador Tess Okafor and several other human representatives. They'd offered cookies, as predicted. Thresh had tried one. It was devastatingly delicious. So, Tess said, smiling warmly, I understand you've been having some difficulties with our military operations? Thresh appreciated the diplomatic understatement. Your species is, challenging to engage with. We've been told we're a lot. Another human, a diplomat named Marcus Flynn, admitted cheerfully. But hey, at least we're consistently a lot. You know what you're getting. That's precisely the problem. We don't know what we're getting. Your tactics are unpredictable. Your soldiers make decisions that violate every military doctrine we've established. Tess leaned back, considering. Admiral, can I be honest with you? Please. We're not trying to be unpredictable. We're just being ourselves. And yeah, that means sometimes we make choices based on gut feelings rather than calculations. Sometimes we fight harder because we're protecting people we care about. Sometimes we do things that don't make logical sense but feel right anyway. She picked up another cookie, offering it to Thresh. The thing is, emotions aren't weaknesses, they're information. They're data points your logical systems don't account for. And, in complex situations where pure calculation isn't enough, that emotional data can make the difference between success and failure. Marcus nodded. Plus, we're stubborn. Like, really stubborn. Tell us something's impossible, and we take it as a challenge. It's probably not healthy, but it's gotten us pretty far. Thresh processed this. So, your entire military strategy is based on stubbornness and feelings? And friendship, Tess added. Don't forget friendship. We fight harder when we're fighting alongside people we care about. We take risks to protect each other. We refuse to abandon our people, even when logic says we should. That's inefficient. Maybe, Tess agreed. But it's effective. And more importantly, it's who we are. We're not going to stop being emotional or irrational or stubbornly optimistic just because it doesn't fit someone else's framework. She smiled. That particular human smile that Thresh was learning to recognize, the one that said challenges were opportunities in disguise. But here's the good news, Admiral. We don't want to fight you. We never did. We just wanted you to stop attacking us, and maybe, possibly, consider that different approaches can coexist. You're offering peace? We're offering friendship. Peace is just the starting point. After that comes trade, cultural exchange, mutual defense agreements, and eventually someone suggests a joint military exercise that turns into a competition that turns into a tradition that everyone looks forward to annually. Marcus grinned. Plus, we make really good barbecue. You haven't lived until you've tried Earth-style ribs. Thresh felt that odd sensation again. Hope mixed with amusement, mixed with resignation, that her entire worldview was being reconstructed by cookies and casual conversation. I'll need to present this to the council, but I believe we can reach an agreement. Excellent. Tess pulled out a datapad. I've prepared a preliminary treaty framework. Standard stuff. Non-aggression pact, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. Oh, and we'd love to invite some of your military leaders to observe our training operations. Might help explain why we do what we do. That would be acceptable. Wonderful. Also, and this is just a suggestion, but maybe consider letting your soldiers express emotions. Bottling everything up isn't healthy. We learned that the hard way a few centuries ago. Thresh considered this, considered Drex 15, saying something felt right. Considered her own newfound ability to smile. Considered a future where the collective didn't fight against humanity but learned from them. Ambassador Okafor, I have a question. Of course. Why do you help? Why offer peace to someone who's been attacking you? Why share your advantages with potential enemies? Tess's expression softened. Because that's what humans do, Admiral. We believe everyone deserves a chance. We believe cooperation beats conflict. And honestly, we like making friends. Better to face it together than alone, Marcus added. Plus, your military technology is really impressive. We'd love to collaborate on some joint development projects. Combine our creativity with your precision? Could produce some amazing results. And there it was. The human approach to everything. Turn enemies into friends, turn conflicts into opportunities, and never stop believing things could be better. It was illogical. It was inefficient. Was absolutely unprecedented in galactic history. It was working. Thresh extended her primary appendage in the human gesture of greeting she'd been practicing. Ambassador, I believe this is the beginning of a beneficial partnership. Tess shook her hand, grinning. Admiral, I think you're going to fit in just fine. As Thresh left the diplomatic vessel later, cookies in hand and a peace treaty being drafted, she reflected on everything that had changed. The collective would need to adapt, would need to accept that their way wasn't the only way, would need to learn that emotions weren't weaknesses to eliminate, but strengths to understand. It would be difficult, uncomfortable, completely contrary to everything they'd built their society around. But somewhere in the Theta Quadrant, Captain Riley Vasquez was probably celebrating another impossible victory, laughing with her crew, being gloriously and terrifyingly human. And Thresh realized something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. She couldn't wait to meet her. Because if humanity had taught the collective anything, it was this. The universe was far more interesting when you stopped trying to control everything and started embracing the beautiful, chaotic, emotional mess of existence, even if it did involve tequila and karaoke nights, especially if it involved those things. After all, when you can't beat them, join them, and maybe, just maybe, become better for it.